Good morning, social studies. This is Mr. Melendez, and I'm bringing you lesson topic 5.12, Justice After World War II. So we come to a time frame now that the war has ended. The Allied forces win the war against Germany and Japan. Now we get to a point in the war that Europe has to start picking up the pieces of this devastating war. And one of the ways that they do this is they're going to start holding trials against criminals that were specifically German Nazi soldiers who committed a lot of heinous acts against not just soldiers, but of course the Jewish people during this Holocaust time. The reason why that they are held in Germany, they're held in a place called Nuremberg, and this is the reason why I'm going to explain to you why it's called the Nuremberg Trials. In Germany, there's a city called Nuremberg, and Nuremberg is untouched by the war. They're a very lucky city that they're not destroyed and is pretty much intact, so they're able to hold it in that city because a lot of buildings are still standing. The second reason why they wanted to hold it in Germany is because of the devastation that happened during World War II. We have to realize that the United States was very lucky at this time. The war was not fought in the United States. Even though back in December of 1941, the Japanese did attack Pearl Harbor, but that was the extent of any kind of devastation that we suffered within United States borders. 99% of the war is fought overseas, away from the United States. So having the trials in Germany, in Europe, is going to bring some kind of closure and satisfaction to the people who had survived during this time frame. We call it the trials because we see close to anywhere between 22 to 24 Nazi leaders, soldiers, and high-ranking officials who are brought to trial during this time frame. The Nuremberg trials last for 4 years. 1945 to 1949. And one of the things that we want to kind of discuss in this mini lesson is the fact that the Allies, the four countries that actually win the war, which is the United States, Britain, France, and Russia, had to kind of get together and create a system, some kind of international court system that they were going to use to bring these individuals to justice. And they had to do this right away. As you can see, once the war ends in 1945, the trials start. So they had to come together and they had to kind of come up with a way of how they were going to deal with these individuals. Now, a tribunal, which is what they have, is very similar to like the courts that we have here in the United States. Remember that particularly when we talk about courts in the United States, it's usually overseen by one judge. And this one judge decides or kind of oversees matters, mostly dealing with like disputes and criminal cases. Where a tribunal is usually more than one judge. The Nuremberg trials has 4 representative judges, one from each country, the United States, Britain, France, and Russia. And a tribunal usually deals with a specialized or a specific matter, which in this case is dealing with war crimes during World War II. What the 4 representatives had to do in the tribunal is they kind of had to narrow down exactly what it is that they were going to charge all these individuals. And they came up with 3 specific charges. Crimes against peace, which is usually planning or starting a war. War crimes, which is the second charge, and war crimes usually deals with killing prisoners of war, all right, or treating them inhumanely, torture, things like that. And the third charge is crimes against humanity. This one is specifically the ones that they kind of go, usually are the ones that they want to use to charge these specific Nazi officials, because crimes against humanity deals with killing innocent civilians. So this one is used for the massive genocide against the Jewish population in Europe. So the tribunal narrows down to these three charges, and now they go through the steps of holding these trials. And like I said, these trials last for about 4 years. And within these 4 years, we see anywhere between 22 to 24 individuals who are either Nazi soldiers or Nazi high officials or sympathizers and supporters. And a majority of them are convicted. A majority of these individuals are either sentenced to death, receive life in prison, or very lengthy jail terms. What makes the Nuremberg Trials very important in our history, and why we're talking about it within this specific mini lesson, is that this is the first time that we deal with creating an international system. You got to remember that each country has their own court or law system, and every country has different rules or different laws that apply. So it's very hard to try to charge an individual and then charge them with so many different laws that they violated from all these different countries. So instead of doing that, they come together and they establish this kind of criminal court, international court system in order to deal with things like this. So the Nuremberg Trials becomes the important step in establishing an international system of justice to bring war criminals or people who violate, let's say, crimes against humanity, bring them to justice. And we see later on in the future, after World War II, that we use it for Japanese war criminals, and we also use it later on in what happens in Rwanda, and of course the former Yugoslavia, which happens in the 1990s and early 2000s with Bosnia-Herzegovina. In our lesson for today, you're going to be given a graphic organizer, which is in Google Docs, which is labeled Justice After World War II. What you want to do with this particular Google Doc as you open it is that you want to go ahead and kind of look at it, and it's telling you that it's giving you kind of like these three columns. And within these three columns, you have facts, you have a statement, and then what do you think? So the question that is kind of the overall arching question that's asking you is, should Nazi leaders be punished for the crimes committed during the Holocaust? And if so, who should be punished? What punishments do they deserve? So what you're looking at is, when you open up your graphic organizer, the first thing that you see is an actual model that you can use. All right. So in this particular model, Winston Churchill, who is the British Prime Minister, believes that Nazi leaders should be hanged immediately, that there should be no trial, that we should just take them and just hang them right away. So those responsible for the Holocaust should be killed or jailed. They do not have the right to a fair trial in a court of law. In this particular scenario, we want to know what you think. So in this model, we highlighted strongly disagree. And in the part where it says explain your choice, we went ahead and put in an explanation that we feel like that every particular person, regardless if they're criminal or not, deserves representation and deserves a trial. And we put that explanation in there, and you can read that on your own. The other two are basically talking about bringing perpetrators to justice in a court. Is it effective, and is it effective in a way that it's going to prevent future crimes? Again, you're going to have to highlight whether you strongly agree, or agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And then put on the bottom there, explain your choice. You're basically explaining your rationale for your decision on whether you agree or disagree. And the last one is dealing with, since each country has its own laws, citizens should be brought to trial by the courts of their own country. And this one's kind of a little tricky, because when it comes to the Nuremberg trials in Germany, at the time, holding it in Germany, Germany itself as a country did not have any specific laws dealing with mass killings or mass genocide. So of course this brings to light, if there is no law that talks about these specific crimes, should they be charged with these crimes in the country that they're holding these trials. Of course, again, you would pick strongly agree, agree or disagree, and then of course explain your rationale. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of the mini lesson. Of course, if you have any questions, you can email myself or Miss Sonia, or come visit our office hours if you need further assistance. Don't forget to not just read the scenarios and look at this YouTube video, but I will be posting another YouTube video that kind of gives a overall explanation about the Nuremberg Trials. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the lesson. This is Mr. Melendez. I'm punching out. Have a good day.